Hello guys, and welcome along to another enthralling episode of Off the Rails with me, the offrailgamer. It's episode 3, which means if this is your first time listening, there's already roughly an hour's extra content you can go back to in episodes 1 and 2. But do that later once you've finished listening to this third episode. You've started now, so you may as well stick with it. Besides, I haven't been doing this long enough yet to have set up any running jokes, and each episode covers a different topic, so you don't need to worry about listening to these early podcasts in order. As always, I put the usual links to all my socials in the podcast description, and the usual plug for my YouTube channel will be coming your way in just a moment when I tell you all about what I've been playing recently. But before we get into all that, I have to let you know that there's a segment missing this week. There will be no gaming news content today. Now, unless something truly unforeseen has happened between my recording this episode and my publishing it online, which has resulted in there being no news to talk about, and touch wood, nothing terrible does happen between now and then, the reason I have no gaming news segment this time around is simply because I've been away. In fact, if you do happen to be listening to this episode on the day I put it out there, I might be sat behind the wheel of my car making the 8+ hour drive home from Bonnie, Scotland. I've only got to go as far as Durham, but I drive real slow. I jest, of course. But today, as in today for you, but only if you're listening on the first airing date, and not today for me as I record this, I really am saying goodbye to the land in the north and taking myself due south. On a quick aside here, I am a bit of a fan of the show Due South, a programme I thoroughly enjoyed as a kid, and then again around 12 years ago now when the BBC was showing reruns at lunchtime. But we're not here to talk about iconic 90s television shows. We're here to talk about video games, am I right? Yes, of course I am. I haven't forgotten the real reason we're all here. So, in an effort to get back on track, or even back on the rails, if you will, my excursion north has necessitated that I record this episode long in advance. Therefore, at the time of recording, I cannot know what stories will still be considered newsworthy by the time my voice grates against your eardrums. Or eardrum if you're listening through a single earphone or earbud. And that's the reason I've decided to skip the segment in this episode, as I figured no news must surely be better than old news. With all that out of the way, I think we can finally move on to the first part of the show, and I'll tell you all about the games I've been playing recently. First up, and this is my sales and marketing section, since the last episode I've put a couple of videos up on YouTube. Almost 2 weeks ago I played some Wu-Tang Taste the Pain, a fighting stroke brawler game featuring rap legends the RZA, the Jizza, Old Dirty Bastard, Inspector Deck, Raekwon the Chef, You God, Ghostface Killer, and the Method Man. I'll be honest, I had no idea of this game's existence until very recently, but I really like the music of Wu-Tang Clan, so when I did finally stumble across this PS1 title, I had to grab myself a copy and stick it up on my channel at the earliest opportunity presented to me. I won't delve too deeply into the game's storyline here, as you can pick that up from the video I uploaded, but I loved the progression mechanic of the 36 chambers, which, for those of you who don't know, references the group's first album, Enter the Wu-Tang, an absolute classic featuring tracks such as Cream, Protect Your Neck, and Wu-Tang Clan Ain't Nothing to with, and thereby also the 36th chamber of Shaolin Kung Fu film. I had a lot of fun with this game, but if you haven't checked out the video yet and are thinking of heading over there now, just be warned, I entered the parental lock passcode to get the full 18 certificate experience. If you have the means of playing Wu-Tang Taste the Pain for yourself, I would highly recommend it. Next on the channel, I broke out the old Mega Drive again, or Genesis, if I ever get any listeners from across the pond, as you guys put it. This time I was playing Mega Bomberman. If you're familiar with any of the Bomberman games, there won't be anything much I can say here that you don't already know. In Mega Bomberman, the world has been shattered into pieces that you must now find and put back together by, blowing things up? In each level, there is a shard of the world encased in a protective bubble and surrounded by assailants looking to stand in your way. There are also some towers that need to be blown up in order to release the world shard that you can then collect. At this point, any blocks that you left intact turn into coins for you to pick up to increase your score. I hasten to add, though, that it's worth exploding blocks as some of them contain power-ups that allow you to carry more bombs or increase the range of your attacks, among other things. Once you've completed all the levels, you're taken to the stage finale room to face a boss battle. And that's where I'm going to stop this discussion, because I don't want to spoil the video for anyone that hasn't watched it yet. So what have I been playing in my free time? Well, not too much, honestly. In episode 2, I talked about PDC World Championship Darts, and I have to say it's really taken over a lot of my free time. In fact, I probably need to think about putting a video up so you can see what I'm talking about. Last time I spoke to you, I think I was going into my first semi-final. 2 grueling 8-set matches later versus Raymond van Barneveld and then Colin Lloyd, I was lifting the World Championship trophy and heading into my second tournament. If this has piqued your interest in the slightest, you can go back and listen to episode 2, after this episode of course. I talked about PDC a little more in that one. And that's what I've been playing recently. Now, in the absence of any news, let's press on with today's main event. This week, I want to talk about a subject that's certainly been on the decline in recent years. On the decline, but not yet done for. This week, I want to talk about local multiplayer. I certainly appreciate that online gaming is pretty awesome, and I can only imagine we'd have been scrambling over ourselves to get the chance to prove our prowess at FIFA 99 against global competition back in the day. However, what we had instead was a second controller, or perhaps at best a multi-tap, allowing up to 4 buds to sit around the TV and go head-to-head, or team up with some local co-op split-screen gaming. And that was just the best. So, although some studios are still putting out local multiplayers, I am now going to give you a rundown of some of my favourites, both old and new. Who among you remembers Time Splitters on the PS2? To this day, I still on occasion use Deacon Swain's catchphrase, "Oh boy, am I ready for this?" when I'm about to leave the house to go shopping or hit up the gym. Time Splitters is a first-person shooter. Okay, confession time. I said in the intro that you don't need to listen to the podcast in episode order, and now I keep making references to things I've said in previous episodes. If you go back and listen to episode 2, I made a bold generalization about not always getting on with first-person games, and since then, I keep coming up with an ever-growing list of games that proves contrary to this. What was cool with Time Splitters was that it gave you the usual campaign and a series of multiplayer games set in maps based on the locations visited in the storyline, but also you could buddy up with a friend and play through the story missions together in local co-op. I remember doing just this and almost finishing up the campaign in one Saturday afternoon. The other multiplayer options included your fairly standard fare of mini-games, including Capture the Flag and Deathmatch. Me and another friend would frequently bung Time Splitters on and duke it out to see who would be victorious. Of course, we'd fill our teams with AI NPCs for extra cannon fodder, and I remember we both really had it in for poor old Mr. Big. Time Splitters, as the game title suggests, takes place through different time periods, which means you could be wielding a whole range of different weapons, from the blunderbuss or Tommy gun of the early to mid part of the 20th century, to the sci-fi handgun or ray gun carbine. Whether taking on hordes of ancient Egyptian mummies together, or going head-to-head to settle old scores, Time Splitters gave us hours and hours of sofa surfing 2-player fun, and for that, I will always remember it fondly. Now, let's bring things much more up to date, as the next game on my list is none other than Overcooked, a game set in a kitchen so fraught with danger, be it from strange portals opening up in the floor, or two halves of the kitchen existing in the back of two lorries that you have to hop between while they each move at speed along the motorway. I think I'd rather be sweating it out in Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen while he yells obscenities at me. Overcooked is totally chaotic if you don't know what you're doing, but if you partner up with the right friend, you'll soon have your kitchen running like a well-oiled machine. Choose the wrong friend of mine, and this game could result in you never wanting to speak to each other ever again, as you fiercely bark orders at one another and argue over who should be chopping tomatoes and who should be washing the dishes. Just like in real life, really, isn't it? Again, I jest. At the start of Overcooked, the city is under attack from a ravenous meatball, and you try desperately to cook enough food to satiate its appetite. In spite of your best efforts, though, you will be unable to fulfill this monumentously tall order. Thankfully, at the very moment the city is about to be destroyed, the Onion King takes you back in time and sends you out into the world to tackle a whole range of different culinary challenges in order to prepare you for a do-over with the monstrous meatball. I'd seen people playing Overcooked together on the YouTubes, and to me, it looked like a really stressful game. So when I was first invited to play co-op, I was almost filled with a dread that I'd be terrible and really let the team down. But after we'd earned a few 3-star scores, I quickly got into it and wanted to check out just one more level before switching it off. Listeners, you may not be aware, but before I started uploading content to YouTube as the offrailgamer, I was on a shared channel with my good friend. If you search for Game Void, you'll find the Overcooked episode we filmed together. I'll include a link to this video in the podcast description. Before moving on to the next game, I'll leave this advice here. If you do decide to play Overcooked with a friend, just remember, be kind to one another. It is only a game after all. Wii Sports takes the next spot on this list, and how could I not include this really? Gameplay takes full advantage of the Wii's motion controls, which makes for a more immersive experience than other sports games that only require the well-timed press of a button or flick of an analog stick. Though please don't consider this a dig at other titles, especially given my current addiction to PDC World Championship darts mentioned in the intro. In the last podcast, here we go again. I mentioned that I had neglected Nintendo in terms of home consoles right up until the pandemic struck. And certainly this was true when the Wii dropped. I was still quite content with my PS2 at the time. My older sibling, on the other hand, picked up the Nintendo's latest offering, and I started to learn my lesson. Wii Sports was fun. It was really fun. The sports aside, which I will come to soon enough, Wii Sports offers a really great party experience if you get a few friends together to compete for the best score. Honestly, you're sure to have a blast. I'll run through the list of sports, but I'm probably going to give more time to 2 out of the 5 activities that I personally found to be the most fun, so I'll leave those till last. As such, I'll probably treat this as a countdown from my least to most favourite. So without further ado, let's jump in at number 5 with boxing. From memory, I think players grab the Wii controller in one hand and nunchuck in the other, and swing fists to throw jabs, right hooks, and uppercuts. As an experience, this wasn't awful, but failing to deliver the same levels of fun as the other sports categories, I just never played enough of the boxing to be able to say much more about it. Number 4 is baseball. I almost feel like I'm doing the baseball a little dirty here, as it is actually quite fun, but there are 3 other Wii sports that I had more fun with. Besides which, you'll probably find yourself hitting so many foul balls, scoring can get a little tedious. Saying that, there is little that beats the elation you'll experience when you do eventually hit a home run. When playing with a friend, you'll put on separate teams and take turns between bowling, or pitching, as I believe is the correct term, and fielding, or, on the other side, batting. I'll tell you now, I have never seen a Wii baseball game finish with a scoreline anywhere close to what you might see if you were to go to a Milwaukee Brewers game, for example. In at 3, we look at tennis. This, for me, is where things start to get more interesting. I'm not a fan of tennis. As a sport, I've never been able to sit through a single set, let alone a full match, or heavens forbid, a tournament. I don't hate tennis, but as a spectator sport, it's just not for me. I can't say the same for Wii tennis. There's actually something fun in racking up volleys or trying to serve an ace. The only thing I have to say, though, is that I think Mario Power Tennis did a better job with the special power moves, just adding that extra level of fun. My second favourite sport, and I appreciate this has become a list within a list, is the golf. As much as televised tennis isn't my thing, televised golf really isn't my thing. In fact, it's a toss-up between golf and horse racing as to which I'd least want to watch. Thankfully, Wii Sports isn't making me sit through the PGA Tour. Wii Sports Golf lets you select the appropriate club to take the next shot, and then by waving the Wiimote through the air, you control the power and accuracy of the swing. This makes for a great local multiplayer experience as you compete for the best, lowest handicap going round the 18-hole course. Which means I'm giving the top spot to Wii Sports Bowling. Aside from being a good deal easier than the real thing, I'd say this is a really good representation of bowling. There is still the chance that you could roll a gutter ball or set yourself up with a nasty split. But if you flick your wrist just right as you release the ball, you'll soon find yourself racking up the strikes. And you'd best believe offrailgamer likes turkey. I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here, based purely on people that I know, and guess that bowling is the most popular of the Wii sports. And I can tell you I've had a lot of fun playing this with friends. But I think there's one more thing to say about this title before moving on to the next game. For each sport, at least I think that's the case, there are challenges to complete, such as who can hit the most home runs out of 10 balls pitched, or who can knock down the most number of pins when they're arranged differently to the standard 10-pin triangle. These are great fun, particularly if you're not looking to commit the time required to play a full game. Sticking with Nintendo for the minute, the next game I want to talk about is Mario Kart Double Dash on the GameCube. Now, I'm a real fan of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch, and I really enjoy competing against players from all over the world in online play. But that really flies in the face of the topic I've chosen for this week's podcast, besides which, before there was Mario Kart 8, there was Double Dash. And of course there were other iterations from the series before that. But for my money, Double Dash offers the best local multiplayer experience. In Double Dash, the karts are fitted with 2 seats, one for the driver and one for whoever you want riding shotgun to be in charge of deploying the deplorable blue shell or dropping their banana peel on the track so that some other poor team should quite literally slip up. The joy of Double Dash is that players can each drive their own karts, or if anyone in the party is having a hard time navigating the courses on their own, they can piggyback on another player and take control of the weaponry rather than the racing. Now, isn't that nice? But there's a dark side to GameCube's Mario Kart Double Dash. A course so difficult it was considered too cruel and torturous to subject anyone to, even by the demons of hell itself. I am, of course, talking about the Rainbow Road. I detest this track, and from my experience, I think this is probably the toughest version of the course, so brightly coloured it would rival even Jason Donovan's coat of many colours. The road surface is so slippery I can only imagine there had been a terrible accident at the nearest Vaseline factory, and with ill-placed gaps in the walls at the sides of the tracks, pretty much at every bend in the road, you'll find yourself jettisoned off into the endless abyss of space much more than you'll ever spend time burning rubber in this absolute pig of a race. But so long as you're not playing against someone masochistic enough to have played so much that they actually got good at Rainbow Road, I mean seriously, I would have to rank this as the Dark Souls of racing games, then you and your pals should have a good enough time yanking each other's chains as one by one you watch your characters get yeeted into the great void. And at least you can always whip round the Yoshi circuit next. Phew. After dredging up those painful memories, I feel almost ready to fight someone now. Well, I mean, I don't want to actually fight someone IRL. I bet it hurts, doesn't it? No. What I'm talking about now is possibly the greatest fighting game released on home console. Namco's Tekken 3. This third tournament to establish who is the King of the Iron Fist really seemed to cement everything that's so great about the series, with improved graphics, slightly at least, over the first two outings, the introduction of a third generation of the Mishima family, and Tekken Ball, which supposes what it would look like to see the usual cast of hardened competitors kick back with a less than friendly game of volleyball. This really is the peak gaming experience of all the Tekken games. Now, as with pretty much all games, I'm not exactly the best at Tekken 3, and I never did get the hang of committing to memory the complex sequence of buttons needed to execute a furious combination of moves, almost certain to result in a perfect win every time. I did, however, manage to unlock every character. Bar one. To unlock new characters, all you need to do is beat every level of the arcade game with each of the starting characters. This starts out easily enough as the likes of Lei, Yoshimitsu, and Paul Phoenix eliminate their peers from the competition. Things start to ramp up a bit though when you come face to face with Heihachi Mishima, whose moves not only really pack a punch, but also this cheeky so-and-so even regenerates health if you pause between moves and let him take a short breather. After you win your bout against Heihachi, you face Ogre, an ancient entity that I think was dug up somewhere in Mexico, or maybe South America, according to the game's storyline. That is, at least if memory serves me right. After kicking butt once again, the game takes a bizarre plot twist and has you fight the weaker incarnation of True Ogre. With the wings of a giant bat, horns of an ibex, and an arm made of snakes, True Ogre almost seems to resemble South Park's Scuzzlebutt, or Man-Bear Pig. True Ogre doesn't put up much of a fight though, and you'll soon be watching your chosen character's victory cinematic. I confess that there was one character that I never unlocked though, and that was Dr. Boskonovich. To unlock this last character, you have to beat Tekken Force mode, which plays as a side-scrolling beat-em-up, almost like Streets of Rage or Double Dragon. Needless to say, I never did this. I'm going to give Game Void another shout out, as we played this next game in our very first episode, and had an absolute ball with it. I put another link in the podcast description just in case you want to find it. But you don't even know what I'm talking about yet, which seems very remiss of me. The title of this next game is Totally Reliable Delivery Service. If you're not familiar with this game, the characters handle very like those in Gang Beasts or Human Fall Flat. Two games that I would have included in this discussion, but for the fact they're somewhat similar, and I had already chosen to include Totally Reliable. In Totally Reliable Delivery Service, players almost take control of characters and try to guide them around the map, carrying parcels to a drop-off location. Initially, you'll waddle around struggling to complete the simplest of tasks whilst battling the deliberately loose controls. The hilarity really ensues, though, when you're tasked with carrying a package somewhere miles away, and the game gives you a vehicle to assist, in inverted commas, you on your way. Vehicles can include vans, pickup trucks, and even a hot air balloon. Hold on tight, though, to both the vehicle and the mail. Rewards are given based on timeliness, and on causing minimal damage to whatever it is you have in transit. And that nearly does it for this week, but there's just one more game I want to include. And for this one, we're staying on Sony's original PlayStation. The game I'm closing out Off the Rails' third episode with is none other than Army Men 3D, which sees you running around in the green plastic skin of a toy soldier. What's interesting about Army Men 3D is that the solo campaign plays out in somewhat realistic locations. And though this partly carries into the multiplayer versus games, head-to-head also sees you manoeuvring plastic tanks around the floor of a child's bedroom furnished with bedposts, chest of drawers, and other toys including an inflatable ball. Army Men 3D multiplayer doesn't exactly offer a unique experience, with multiplayer staples already covered in the Time Splitters description from earlier in this episode, but with the toy soldier aesthetic, it definitely has a charm of its own, and is another game my friends and I enjoyed from the same settee. Guess who's got a thesaurus for Christmas last year? Settee indeed. Guys, I'm just about running out of steam here, but I am nowhere close to talking about all of my favourite couch multiplayers, which is why I'm making this episode 1. I'll be back with more examples in 2 weeks' time. Before then, you can catch up with previous episodes of the podcast, and if you want even more of me, visit YouTube channels offrailgamer and Gamevoid by following the links in the description. It's been real nice talking to you again, at least for me, even if not for you. All I can think that's left for me to say is bye!